Okay, looks like we're ready to go. So welcome everybody to the Overcome Public Speaking Anxiety and Present with Confidence webinar. Just before we go any further, just need to move this along to the disclaimer. So if you're participating or watching, you must agree with the disclaimer. Realize this is just informational and educational advice. I'll read this out because I know some people's computers won't download the information at the same speed as everybody else. We have people all over the world who've joined us. So far, I see Sebastian from is up in Taiwan, Wendy over in New Zealand. Oh, excuse me, who was that from Darwin? I need to put my Heather in New Zealand. Sorry, Heather. Oh, Beverly from North Carolina, USA. Excellent. Kerry in Perth. Alrighty, so I'm going to read this out. This program is provided for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Whilst SET, Simple Energy Techniques, which is the acupressure tapping point that I'm going to be using during the seminar, provides impressive results for most people, there's no guarantee it will achieve your goals or be as painless as it is for others. Everybody's situation is different. Please consult your physician and or therapist regarding your use of SET, particularly if you are suffering from mental health problems. All right, so now we have the disclaimer out of the way. Let's move on. I actually have a presentation to go through. We've been working madly here for the last hour trying to get this system to work, so I'm hoping it's going to stick with us for the whole time. As I mentioned, this is the first time that I have done a live webinar myself. I've participated in ones that other people have organized, but this time being the organizer, a lot more involved, I have to tell you. And anyway, let's hope it works for everybody. And it's nice to see it working so fast. I'm going to switch my video off, so the focus is going to be on the presentation for a little while. Then I'll come back a little bit later, and particularly when we go through the tapping and so on, I want to be live with you. I'll certainly be live with you the whole time on audio, but I just switch off the video for now, and I'm going to make the presentation main thing. So let's just switch these both off out of the way for now, so that we have the presentation is our main focus. All right, so this is an image of a workshop we did a couple of years back in Brussels, one I did with Carol Look on abundance and success. And some of you know my wife. I'm going to talk about my wife because she's recently overcome her lifelong fear of public speaking and was able to present at a conference and really enjoy it. Yet still, when I showed her this image, she went, "Ooh," meaning that that size group was still something that struck a kind of dread for her, because the group that she presented to was about half the size of that, not even half the size of that. So it shows that even when you get to a certain level, sometimes there's another level that you need to apply the techniques to. And people have all kinds of reactions to public presentation. And let me just put the chat back on, because I want to see what people are writing and saying as we go. So I'm just going to put that back on. I do want to see what people say. I do want to actually respond to your questions and stuff as we go along. And what's the reaction that you have to a public presentation? For my wife, it was something that she dreaded her whole life and avoided. And as she said in a in a letter to Megan, I don't know if you're on here, Megan. If you are, just in the chat, because Megan was one of the people who sent me her responses, and Louise was so touched by some of the things that Megan wrote that she wrote back to her. So Megan said, I feel fear when someone mentions me talking about a topic to a group of people. Straight away, I say no. No way. And then she went through all of the different things that she worries about. And Louise wrote back and said, you could have been writing from my perspective the way it was before. Yeah, worry that I won't have anything interesting to say, scared that they won't like me. I want to be a perfect speaker without I want to be perfect the first time. This is one of the things that I had to go through with my wife, to ratchet down your expectations. Yeah, Janet saying nervous, don't remember the points I want to make. Overexcited, Sharon. Wow. Yeah, and that's really interesting too. People used to say, when I had this problem, and what a lot of people won't know is that I used to have a massive problem with speaking in public. I used to have massive issues myself. Um, I still remember when I was a kid, just shaking, literally shaking all over my body the whole time, before the presentation, during the presentation, and after the presentation. And I still remember as well the audience reaction when I said something interesting. It was like they wake up. That was compelling to me. So I was excited by that, but I was terrified at the same time. And people used to say, oh, you should tell yourself that this anxiety is excitement. Well, it isn't. They're two different feelings. And they can be connected together. And when you get the anxiety to settle down, like you can do with the tapping, then you can end up with the excitement, which is really can drive you to have a fantastic experience. And so that's really what we're after. I mentioned in the advertising for this webinar that I would share some of the secrets that professional speakers use. Let me share something first that a lot of people don't know about professional speakers, and that is that a huge number of them suffer from anxiety and stage fright. The majority of them, they feel the fear and do it anyway. And I've often thought that some of them I've heard about could really do with learning the tapping. There's a guy in Australia who runs, he probably runs a seminar a week, and he's well known internationally, but every presentation he's got clammy hands, he is sweating in his armpits often so you can see it, and his heart is going through the map, and he shares this information, and it doesn't stop him from going forward. But man, oh man, what a stress on the system to have that happening to you. And so yeah, I'm just noticing some of the responses. Vibha, heart beating faster, even right now, just talking about this. So if you already know the tapping, now is the time to start, because you're tuned into that issue. And so we're going to be looking at how to use simple energy techniques, this simple approach that Dr. David Lake and I have developed for acupressure points. And before I go on, I just want to, for those of you who are not familiar with this, I'm going to put up the diagram of the upper body points. These are the same points that are used in emotional freedom techniques. We use the same points in SET. We just have some differences in the way we use the process, and our process is very much simplified from what they do in EFT. So if you know the points of EFT, then you know the points of SET. They're the same points, except for a lot of people only use these upper body points that I'm showing right now with EFT, whereas we also use the finger points. So this is a diagram with the finger points, and I'm going to go through this, and I know that some of you are again, you're not going to be receiving this at the same time as everybody else. I know that different download speeds that people have can cause challenges with seeing what's on the screen. Some people don't see it until much later, so I'm going to go through it. But again, thanks everyone for letting me know some of the reactions that you're having. My aim is to show you how to calm that down, not just for now, not just for first aid, which a lot of people use tapping for, but so that you can enjoy the experience of presenting. So what we're going to do is we're going to just do a little bit of this tapping, and I might go through that on the video with you. I'll leave the diagram of the points. We're starting with the upper body points. I'll leave that diagram up, but I'm also going to go through with this on the video for those of you who are accessing the video of me, because it'd be really useful to be doing this tapping the whole time during this program so that you are getting some relief on some of the different aspects of your fear. So once you know these points, then you can use any of them in any order. So the first point is on the top of the head, and sometimes it's helpful to just tap that with all of your fingers. You can tap it with 2 or 3 or 4 fingers. And you can tap these points and focus on your fear, or you can just tap. And we'll go through the different ways of applying it. And hopefully, if we have time, we'll give you as much as I can on ways to use these techniques. So these are all points used in traditional acupressure and acupuncture for those who are coming in cold. The next point, excuse me, I've got my glasses on so I can see on the computer. Some of you haven't seen me wearing glasses. Not that I'm sneaky, it's just that I don't need them when I'm in a workshop, because my distant vision is totally fine, but on this close work on the computer, I need them. So I'm going to take them off to show the tapping points. So I certainly don't need them for that. But I will need them to read that chat screen because it's so small. So the next point is at the start of the eyebrow. If you go to in between them and then towards one, and just tapping on that point. And for those of you who already know the points, just follow along for a minute while I'm catching everybody up on this, because even if you know tapping, so many of you still have this problem. And I know that because I was you. I was like that. For a long time, I had relief on a lot of issues using tapping, but what I hadn't done was got rid of all of this, certainly for all public presentations. I'll come back to that a little bit later on. So start of the eyebrow on either side, and then on the edge of the temple, and you're tapping hard enough to feel it, but not hard enough to hurt, with 2 fingers of your dominant hand, the one that's easiest to tap with. And then under your eye on the top of your cheek, and then under your nose in the hollow in the midline, and then under your mouth in the hollow in the midline. You can tap as many times as you want. If you want to count, you can do 7 to 10 taps on each point. But if you notice that a certain point works better for you, you can keep tapping on that. And then under your collarbone, just close into the first, where the collarbone comes into the first rib. So if you go to that U in the base of your throat, pick an bone on either side and just go underneath that bone and just tap there on either side. Next spot, under the arm. Ladies, it's about middle of the bra band. Gents, it's if you're not wearing a bra for this presentation, level with the trace around from the nipple to the side of the body. I like to tell people in the seminars that one guy said to me, I don't have a nipple on the side of my body, and I said, well, just tap level with the one that you have. Just tap in at 90 degrees level with the one that you have got. And then the finger points and the hand points. And as you know, we have 2 ways of doing this. One way is by, I've got to find a way to get pushing my hands out here, but I've got to focus on the camera, which is up here. Probably a bad idea because I'm not looking directly at you all the time. I'm looking at the screen. So anyway, you live and you noodle with these webinar things. So we're tapping on the side of the thumb on either hand. I like to, so let's do it this way. So tapping on the side of the thumb, level with the base of the thumbnail, and then down each finger. So this is on the thumb side of the index finger, thumb side of the middle finger, thumb side of the ring finger, thumb side of the little finger, and then on the bottom of the hand, that meaty area, the karate chop point. And then the other point that we use mainly is on the wrist. It's about 2.5 finger widths from the main crease. And if you just tap with the flat of your hand, and then like this, and then just take a deep breath. And most people are going to be already starting to feel a little bit more relaxed. It doesn't mean that you're cured of your problem, although for a very small percentage of people, they can get relief on their problem very quickly because it only has 1 or 2 aspects. But most people have a number of aspects of their problem, and I know a number of you have written to me about how you've been doing tapping for a long time and you still haven't got relief on this issue. And certainly some of you who I know, there's still something that's holding you back. Or you can do it with certain situations, like Megan said, I can present to certain groups about things that I know, but on stuff like tapping, which I don't consider myself to be an expert on, although Megan, you've been using it for a long time and you really do know a lot of it. It's just that you're looking at people way up here and comparing yourself to them. But that's logical. Let's do something about the feeling, because the real problem, if we go back to that image that I started you with, the real problem is this feeling, whatever that reaction is. Even the bottom one, maybe the bottom one looks a little bit like you, Shazza. You said overexcited. So yeah, but maybe some of that excitement has an edge to it, which is a negative edge, and it's therefore means that your primitive alarm system is activated when it doesn't really need to be, because it's seeing this situation as a threat, and the threat is of rejection, humiliation, etc. And that usually has become hotwired into our nervous system because of experiences that we've had in the past. And so in order to get over this, we may need to go back and treat those emotions and reactions. So let me just come back to the presentation. I'm going to go forward with this for a little while. So I'm going to switch off the video again, make the presentation larger. Before I do, I just want to pick up on some of the things that the people have been saying, because I can't see that without my glasses on. So yeah, people just mentioning different aspects that are upsetting to them. You know, Nadia, who wrote to me, she said, feeling like everyone can see me in the throes of my anxiety. And this is what anxiety does. It feeds on itself. So not only do you have the anxiety, you have the fear of the fear, and you also have the fear of being seen to be fearful. And this is why we suppress things. Like, our natural reaction to a threat is to start shaking, but we suppress these reactions, and we try and stop the shaking process because we don't want to be seen to be having a problem. And this is this is one of the challenges. If you really knew how many people have this problem and how many people are suffering with this stuff, you'd be absolutely surprised. One of the great things about working in psychology for as long as I have is that I've been able to see that the universality of human issues. Frank Farrell used to say, what's most personal is most universal. In other words, the things that you think only you have and only you are suffering, everybody's got. You know, I'm remembering Louise when she read Megan's email and just going, wow, this is exactly how I would have described my experience before this. And now she's on the other side of that. But a lot of people are not. And a lot of them are these professional speakers. So here's Mark Hansen, who basically lives a life as a speaker. And this was written a few years back. And he may have done 10,000 talks now. At the time, he'd done 5,000. He says, I've done 5,000 talks in 38 different countries to 2 million people, and I still get scared. The fear of every speaker is I'm not going to be good enough. I've done 5,000 speeches. I've had it at least 4,000 times. Now, that was my experience as well prior to learning the tapping. I as many of you know, I do love to be the center of attention, and so I love that excitement of seeing people getting stuff and helping people to change. And yet, before I learned tapping, my best strategy was the one that Mark uses, which is feel the fear and do it anyway. Feel the fear and go ahead. You know, find a way to try and focus on the audience, or focus on what you want to present, or focus on the value of what you're doing in order to get through the suffering that comes, and the terrible suffering. You know, I remember many times when I first started running seminars and workshops way back in the early days. I used to regularly have a panic attack right in the middle of a workshop. Now that can ruin your whole day. And I'm laughing about it now, but if you've ever experienced a panic attack, then you know that it's not just unpleasant, it's downright sometimes debilitating. At times, I was stopped from presenting at all. I remember one presentation, it was about the first or second workshop I ever ran, and I had this panic moment right in the middle of the seminar, and I felt that horrible feeling just kind of overwhelm me and take over. And what saved me was that one of the participants was looking right at me with a big smile, and I just focused on her face, and that brought me back in the room. And so I'm going to talk a bit about this later, because that mindfulness thing of focusing on what's right in front of you can be a lifesaver. And my friend Rachel Green, she had panic attacks her whole life. She teaches mindfulness meditation. She used mindfulness to overcome her own panic attacks. So these are really helpful techniques. Now, going back to tapping, many of you know my good mate, Dr. David Lake. Some of you won't even know that he used to have a public speaking phobia. In fact, when we first learnt tapping, we went over to study with Gary Craig and met Gary in February 1998 at his seminar. And at that time, David Lake had a severe public speaking phobia. He couldn't even present in front of groups of 6 to 8 people without having a problem. And so Gary was asking for volunteers to go up on stage with him, and so David went up, and the first thing that he had was, got up in front of 75 people, from all over the world. And so his heart started racing and his mouth went all dry and his brain went all foggy, just like it normally did. And then Gary started having him tap and apply EFT on that. Right now, as I'm talking about this, I want you to do a little bit of tapping as we go along. So I'm going to put the video back on just so I can show you, and some of you might want to follow along with the tapping. So, just tapping on these points. It doesn't matter if you're new to this, if you get this wrong. Just doing this process of tapping on these points or tapping on your body generally is going to help any reactions to this that you're having to settle down. And if you resonate with the issues that David was having, if you have some of the same issues that David had, then doing the tapping on that can really help. So, Gary worked through his symptoms of dry mouth and racing heart. Then he went through and applied the tapping to his memories from childhood. And, at that time is using EFT, focusing on specific issues. And this is one of the ways of getting through all of your stuff, is to find the things that are triggering it, the different reactions that you're having, and applying the tapping to them. And I'm asking you to do this now. So please let me know if you're doing that. Follow along and do the tapping the whole time. And you can tap on the upper body points. You can tap on the hand points. You can tap like this using 2 fingers to tap on either points. Or you can do our finger tapping, where you use the thumb of the same hand just to drop down on the side of each finger. And this is a great way of doing tapping because it's portable. So not only can you, I'm moving away from the camera, not only can you use the thumb to tap on each of the fingers, if you want, you can, tap on the side of the thumb as well. So you're stimulating those points. But this is something that I could be doing here while I'm talking to you, and you can't see that I'm tapping away. So good Shazza, good Kerry, good Vibha, Heather, yes. And Heather saying yawning away. Exactly. This is what happens. Most people, when they start doing the tapping, they start going, yawning, or channels open up in the body. So wherever you're constricted, whether it's in your chest, whether it's a feeling in your stomach, whether it's a lump in your throat, whether it's a feeling in your mouth, like David had, the dry mouth feeling, that stuff can start to settle down with the tapping, because the tapping gets into the body. So I'm just putting my hand up just to remind you that I'm still doing it, and I'm going to ask you to do this the whole time. Once you get used to this finger tapping, you can take it with you out in public, and it's portable. Apart from tapping, you can just touch or put pressure on the point. So if you're worried about even people seeing you doing this tapping, if you think that looks a bit funny, and I've seen plenty of people just absently just tapping on their points like this, and without even knowing the technique. Twice I've been sitting next to people on the plane who were doing it, who didn't know the technique at all. They were just doing it. One guy who did actually, one guy, I could see he was trying to cover up the fact that he was doing it. But I often sit on the plane and I'll have the headsets on like now, and I'll just be tapping. There's another way of interlocking your hands, and this way you can tap on a number of points. Now, some of these you can do out in public and some of them you can't. You're not going to get out in front of your audience and just tap on these points unless you're teaching a tapping seminar like I do, which is great. You get to do the tapping anyway. But I presented plenty of workshops to corporate people, and back in the early days when I learned tapping, sometimes just before the presentation, just be, just gently touching or holding these points, or, maintaining these poses where I was just, or just, doing rubbing like this, something which is fairly unobtrusive, but it settled me down before the presentation. So, yeah, Monica, I'm having a reaction even typing this, so tapping as well. Excellent. If we're doing tapping the whole time and you're tuned into your reaction, the tapping works on those negative reactions. It works on the negative symptoms, whether those symptoms are, like David's symptoms, dry mouth, racing heart, whether they are emotional symptoms, whether they're feelings of constriction in the body or whatever, or whether they are images or thoughts or dread or whatever. Okay, so getting back to David's story, I'm going to go through David's story. I'm also going to talk about my wife. And again, I'm going to just take myself off here so focus on the presentation, and we'll go through some of the things that David did. So here's a still from the video taken fairly early, and David's just focusing in on an issue, and Gary's doing the tapping with him, going through all the different aspects. Once he settled down those physiological reactions, then Gary asked a really key question. I can't remember exactly how Gary asked, but the key questions to ask are things like, where have you felt this before in your life? Or if it's a thought, where did you learn this? And so at that point, David went back to some childhood memories of where his dad was cranky. His word was cranky for his dad being upset with him, and then they did the tapping through those experiences. And so one of the ways of doing that is just going through the story of what happened and applying this tapping. So I'm presuming that you still tap along, and as we through some of the aspects that come up that I mentioned, or that come up for people like David and so on, might come up for you. If they do some tapping while you're focusing on that, because that will be getting in and making a difference on those issues. Eventually, once David and Gary had treated some of those past memories and settled in his physiological reactions of fear, then he was able to take the stage. So Gary said, you want me to leave the stage? And he did. And then people were asking questions and so on. That's when David came up with another aspect. And that aspect for him was fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of getting it wrong. And this is what a lot of people have. They have this particularly from childhood. We learned it at school. A lot of us have memories of being humiliated in front of the class, but you don't even have to have had that experience yourself. You can see someone else, called in front of the class to read something out, and see how they are dealt with everybody laughing, or the teacher humiliating them or whatever. And you can internalize a fear from that reaction. So again, David's having the trial by fire. He's out there, he's activated, his issues are coming up. The group are in a really kind way stirring him up with issues, and which a lot of people like to do, don't they? They like to do this when you have a challenge that they don't have, or they're not the ones in the firing line. But it wasn't long before David was able to be out the front and be himself. Now, this is really what it's about. Ultimately, a lot of people think they have to go into a different mode when they present. They have to become someone else. They have to be better than themselves. They have to be on or whatever. And fair enough, a lot of people performing, they get on. But to feel like have to be that, I think the great power is when we can be ourselves and be totally ourselves. And that's what I saw happen with David in front of that group. After he'd had that treatment, a guy named, I'm trying to think of his name now, Don Ilium, a wonderful therapist from up in the USA. He'd been out to dinner with us the night before, and we had a whale of a time. It was fantastic and lots of fun. And he said, I saw this scared old guy go out on stage, and then after a while, I thought, it's Dave. And what he was saying was, he recognized the same Dave that was out with us the night before, that was totally relaxed, that didn't have to put on airs, that was able to be himself, who was able to be funny and joke around with the big group the same way that he'd done sitting at dinner the night before. So, of course, after we had done this, I said to David, when we came back to Australia, I said, well, I'm going to start teaching this in my seminars. Why don't you join me? And he says, why would I want to do that? And I said, well, you can come along, if you only want to present for 5 minutes, you can, or you can present half the seminar. So he agreed to do that. And this workshop was a workshop for professional therapists, was down in Melbourne. David lives in Sydney and I live in Perth, so we're on opposite sides of the country. We both had to fly to Melbourne. And as he was flying down to Melbourne from Sydney, he had this vague fear of the unknown. Now this comes up too. If you haven't done something before, you don't know how it's going to be. There's a fear of, what might happen. And this is why a lot of people, their solution to that is to try and get ultra prepared. And there's nothing wrong with that. Um, the challenge is you don't know how you're going to go. So on the way there in the plane, David was doing the tapping, which must have looked a little bit strange back then. Now occasionally you'll see people tapping in public, but back then it was never done. And he did about half an hour of tapping. And then when the plane landed, the lady sitting next to him put her hand on his arm and she said, "It's okay, we're there now." And she must have thought he had some kind of strange pub flying rituals. Excuse me, public flying was a good one. A strange flying fear, And anyway, we got to the venue, and David introduced himself, and I still remember it. He turned around to me. He said, "I can't believe it. I don't feel any of it." Now, there's a difference. See, if you feel the fear and do it anyway, then you still feel scared. I'm a member of the National Speakers Association of Australia. In fact, I was, excuse me. I used to be. And in fact, I have the highest level award. So let me show you this up on this wall. I'll bring it down. I have Steve Wells, if you can see that, certified speaking professional. Now, in order to be a certified speaking professional, you have to have done at least 500 client presentations, 250 that you provide details with over 5 years, and they have to be, at that time, they had to be a minimum of $1,000 each. So you've proven that you were a professional speaker, you get paid to speak. So I did that. Then I went up to get that award, and I was still scared getting the award. I was still anxious. And although I'd used tapping on a lot of my issues, when I went to the National Speakers Association meetings, I still got anxious going to the damn meetings because I still felt myself was down here and these people is up there. And so the stuff I've learned about tapping since then has helped me. I don't want to steal David's thunder though. I'm going to go back to David because here's his words for his experience after going and doing that test and have found that he didn't have the same experience. So again, I'll read it out for those of you who aren't receiving this directly as it comes online. It said, attendees began to arrive. Instead of feeling as if I was walking the plank, I enjoyed meeting them. Still, I believed the problems would come when I was introduced and when I actually had to do something. To my enormous delight and surprise, nothing bad happened. Even better, I was totally relaxed. My pulse didn't rise one extra beat. My voice was firm, breathing okay, mind clear, responsive, receptive. What a feeling. Now that's the difference of tapping and energy psychology techniques to feel the fear and doing it anyway. Because feel the fear and do it anyway, you can do it 200 times and you still feel, most people feel less fear, but they still feel some. And the fear can still come up. Whereas when you've treated your problems and the different aspects with tapping, they don't tend to come up. And ultimately, you end up not just with a great experience, you end up with the reward of the wonderful satisfaction. So again, in David's words, I had an experience. This is when he wrote to Gary afterwards about his great success. He said, the feedback was very good. I had to struggle mightily to avoid getting a swelled head. For me, it was like a therapeutic multi-orgasm. So anyone who knows David, you can hear him saying this. In fact, I'd rate this day as one of the greatest experiences I ever had, right up there with the birth of our first child. That's the kind of feeling that you have when you get over a massive, massive fear. And my fond wish is for you to have that experience and also to go from the situation of being panicky and fearful and so on and blanking out and whatever, and having the experience of being in front of a group where that doesn't matter and you're able to enjoy it. So now, as you know, I mean, David's about to withdraw from our international long-haul flights. But since later on in 1998 up until now, we've been running international workshops together, and we've been to many, many different cities, and a lot of you online are from those cities, and you've seen David, and he is an absolute picture of calm. Absolute calm. Just the way he is in his regular life is the way he is on stage. I mean, he had to learn how to present, and when he first presented, his presentation wasn't really a great presentation, but he wasn't stopped from doing it by fear. He wasn't stopped from doing it by worrying about what he was going to say. The worry of saying the wrong thing had gone away, and he could be centered in himself. See Monica saying handsome devil. He thinks he is too, I'm afraid. All right. So let me move on a little bit. This is my wife, and when you finish the webinar, if you haven't read it already, I want you to, I'm going to highly suggest you go to our website and have a look at Louise's story about how she overcame her fear to the point where she presented at this conference recently. And my wife, isn't she beautiful? Talking about David being handsome, isn't she beautiful? My darling wife, Louise, and she's now at a point in her life where she's getting very seriously into her art. She's a textile artist, and she does incredibly brilliant work. If you're interested, by the way, you can see her stuff at louisewells.com. And so she's been putting work in exhibitions, just had a private exhibition with 3 other artists that was an absolute bang. She has had her work accepted in juried exhibitions, and now she's looking at doing things internationally. And as an artist, you have to do artist talks. So now she's going to be forced to do something with her life avoiding. All right, well, so the first time she thought, well, I'll just, this art is something I love, so I should be fine. And she tried to wing it. It was a nightmare. Now, at this point, I'm just going to put a little reminder in here to do this tapping, because as we are talking about this stuff, some of you are going to resonate with different issues that come up. And even if you don't, if you are tapping on these points the whole time, we found that the more tapping you do, the better the results. So if you've got any issue with public speaking or presentation fears or performance anxiety, if you're doing the tapping, then those problems will be getting treated in the background while I'm talking. And if there's any issues that resonate for you, then the tapping will start to get into those issues. So please be tapping. If you can do the fingertip tapping, you can tap on the upper body points. If you're in a public place, obviously, you can just touch or hold the points, and so on. All right, so Louise did this, and then after that bad experience, she came to me and said, well, okay, I need to work on this issue. And so we started doing some tapping on it. We went through the different aspects. So when you're working with your issue, you want to identify the different aspects. Now, aspects can be different feelings in your body. Where do you feel it in your body? When you think about speaking or presenting, or when you're in that situation, where is the feeling? And just put your attention on that feeling and do the tapping. So we went through that with Louise, and there's the being focused on. This is a big one for a lot of people, and looking out at the group is a big one for a lot of people. Fear of saying the wrong thing, whatever the aspects are for you, you identify them, and then you do the tapping on them until they settle down. Now, some of those are going to have been triggered by by incidents from your past, which you may ultimately need to treat. But let's just start with whatever you're aware of. So Kerry says, I feel short of breath and butterflies even thinking about it. So now, Kerry, is the time to be tapping. And I'm already thinking right now we're up to we're coming up to about 40 minutes already, and I haven't even scratched the surface. I have so much of this to do. It's so typical that I think that I can cover everything. So I'm already thinking that we might have another session where we do some of this stuff and do some more specific question and answer stuff. But anyway, with Louise, we did that, and then she went and did her next artist talk, and then she was in a situation where she was doing a talk with a number of other people, and they came around the group. Now, this is an issue which is very, very common, the waiting period where the focus is going to come to you. That is an excruciating time. So again, as I'm talking about that, make sure that you are tapping. Please be doing the tapping while I'm talking about this. And if that's an issue for you that you want to focus on, then you can go after this webinar and you can sit down and you can go through those different aspects that are issues for you, bring them up in your mind, notice the reactions that you're having in your body, do the tapping on them, and then just follow that wherever it goes until things settle down. So we did, she was in that situation and she got that fear, and however, she had enough capacity by this point to be able to start to notice that everybody else wasn't perfect as well. Um, in fact, she was in a situation where she was going to be the last one. She had to wait for everybody else, and so she was able to notice that they weren't all perfect and that they were all, some of them were anxious as well, and um, and so that presentation was okay. And anyway, then she went on and she did the next one, and she did the next one, and then ultimately she went to this conference. And this is a picture of her with one of her pieces of work where she was doing her artist talk. One of her friends took this photo. This particular piece is called Honoring Good Men, and it's one that she had in a juried exhibition, and it was acquired by the City of Melbourne because they acquire a piece from each presentation that they, from exhibitions that they like, and they particularly liked her piece. It's a very contemporary idea in a quilting type exhibition. Um, and so let me just go through very quickly with you what led her to succeed, because after that talk, she then went on to do the conference, and we did a lot of work with Louise on getting ready for the conference. And this is pretty much the guidelines for success. There's a few other things, but this is all we have time to do. The key element was that she decided to do it. So many of you I know are avoiding, and anxiety wants to do this. It wants to kind of, I'm talking about it as an entity, but anxiety is something that can shut down your life. And you've got to decide that your life can be bigger than this. Megan wrote all these different aspects about what she was concerned about, and then at the end of her email, she said, "After all that worry and fear abounds, if I was dedicated, I would sit here and tap on these observations. Though if I do, I may end up being comfortable doing talks, and I'm not comfortable with that." Wow. Well, so Louise wrote back, and I'm going to jump forward to what she wrote back here, and then I'll come back to these guidelines. She wrote back and said, "What I want you to know from my experience is it really doesn't matter if you fear public speaking, as long as it's not stopping you from doing what you really want to be doing in your life." This is the key, is that, yeah, fair enough, you can avoid these things. I've had people say, "Oh, I've got a spider fear, but I just avoid them," or a mouse fear, I just avoid them. Well, yeah, you can, and that's the way most people deal with phobias and fears. But if it stops you from doing what you really want in your life, then you've got to decide to do something about it. And Louise says, 20 years ago, Steve dragged me along to Anthony Robbins' Sydney workshop, and one of the main things was the firewalk. Other than the massive fear of doing that, I don't really think it much for me. Overcoming my fear of public speaking, though, has changed my life. She's actually a different person now. She thinks about it differently, and it feels different. And that's what we're really after, because that feeling is really the issue. And without that feeling, you'll be able to go forward. And the tapping is one of the best ways that we know to deal with that. So let's come back to the guidelines. Number one, decide. Excuse me, just taking a sip of my lovely honey and lemon here. Then you've got to check your expectations. A lot of people expect themselves to be perfect. This has actually come through in things that a couple of you have written to me. You're expecting yourself to be perfect is something that you haven't done. On the web page that I'm going to send you to at the end of this webinar, there's an article I did some years back about working with a CEO. And after we got, cleared things on a number of aspects and looked at where he learned his fears and did some tapping on those things, then I said to him, "Okay, how much have you've been rehearsing failure in your mind?" And we did some tapping on the different failure possibilities and stuff. This is another thing you can do. You can think about all the things that might go wrong. Now your mind is already going to do this, whether you like it or not. If you know, a lot of people are like, okay, I'm a positive thinker, I got to focus on what's going to go right, because they're scared by those thoughts about what might go wrong. Well, actually, I'm saying deliberately focus on the things that might go wrong and do the tapping on them. And when I did this tapping with Louise, this was one of the things that we did. I'm really good at coming up with worst case scenarios of what might go wrong and also what you might be upset by. So I brought those up for her, and it was really helpful because some of those things did come up, and when they did come up, they didn't affect her because we'd already done the tapping on them. But I said to Louise, I said, you know, and how many talks have you done in your life? And, you know, because she was like, oh, well, I want to do a really good talk and I want it to be humorous and I want it to be, you know, confident. And I'm like, yeah, but how many times have you done this? And you want everybody, you know, you want it to be like this? And she's like, oh, yeah, okay. So ratchet down your expectations. Be willing to do it not well in order to be able to learn how to do it well. Anything that you don't know how to do, you have to learn how to do. I had this experience, just as an aside, with learning to work with CEOs and people at the top level corporate. And I remember when I attended Alan Weiss's $1 Million Consulting College in Sydney, and I had a private session with him. I was actually anxious talking to this guy because he was like the big guru, and and I thought, well, you know, I won't do the tapping. I'll just see what advice he has. And so I had my pure reaction of anxiety talking with him because he represented what these top CEOs represent. And I said to him, I said, look, I can present to hundreds of people. By that stage, you know, I can present and not have any fear at all anymore. And but when I have to meet with certain types of CEOs, I get really anxious. And his reaction was, well, of course, they're completely different skills. Now, if it as ridiculous as it is, it never occurred to me that they're completely different skills. And I had practiced presenting because now I've been presenting for many years and I'm really good at it. I hope I am. Someone please say I am. No, I know I am. I really love it. I really love groups. I know, you know, we all have flaws, but ultimately, if you're passionate about something, passion is what people really like. And I had to realize that in this case, I hadn't done any practice of approaching these kinds of. Thank you, Monica. I love you. She's, she's yes, you are, Steve. So my expectations were ridiculous at that point. All right. So Louise also did a lot of preparation, practice, and rehearsal. She did the finger tapping, she did continual tapping, she did tapping in the room before she went in. She combined tapping with other techniques. You know, I'm just going to mention these because we don't have time to go into them. Some of you know I've been a champion of logosynthesis developed by Dr. Willem Lammers, Amy Cuddy's power poses. And I'm just going to mention this quickly because this is really helpful, and it's a key issue for people doing presentations that your posture and how you hold yourself can make a massive difference to your results. So this is something that you can combine with tapping. You know, people have been saying for years, fake it till you make it. The problem with faking it till you make it is that a lot of people, when they start doing the faking it, they quit at about I call it the 90-second doubt point. You know, you adopt it, right? Okay, I'm going to be confident. I'm going to put on the confident posture, and then you're like, oh no, that's ridiculous, and you give up. But Amy Cuddy's research showed that our bodies really can change our minds, and our minds can change our behavior, and our behavior can change our outcomes. She says when we think of nonverbals, we think of how we judge others. We tend to forget, though, the other audience that's influenced by our nonverbals, which is ourselves. So for those of you who don't know her research, and by the way, she has a really excellent TED talk. If you haven't seen that, just put Amy Cuddy TED and you'll go to that. You know, it's had millions of views now. It's going all around the world. And this is essentially what she found. She found that if you adopt high power poses, and I'm going to recommend you to do this right now. All right, so here we go. So come on, here you go. This is this is one of the high power poses. By the way, this is typical masculine high power pose, right? Sitting back in the chair. Don't do this in front of people. So, or you can do the, you know, I'm not going to stand up here because then I'm going to go out of the screen. But you know, Louise in the image there, she's doing the Wonder Woman pose, and so they had people adopting these poses, which are high power poses, which are kind of more to do with extension and expansion of the way that you use your body. And as opposed to low power pose. Now, here's an example of a low power pose. Now, this isn't one of the ones that they used in the study, but I just had this. I thought I had to show it to you. So here's my good mate Dave Lake up in Berlin when we were about to separate because we'd been let down by our organisers back then, and I was going home and he was going onward to a kind of failed seminar that he'd committed to do, which, you know, they only had 2 or 3 people that were registered. And, you know, he had a great experience and learned from that, but it was in a low power state at that moment in time. Now here's a couple of the examples of low power poses they were using in the study. So if you want to get yourself into contracted feelings, put yourself in a contracted position. If you want to feel down, put yourself into down positions. If you want to feel more up and more expansive, put yourself into more up and expansive poses. And the really interesting thing about this research, you know, I was when we did go to Tony Robbins' seminar way back then, he was teaching us about power moves. And those of you who know that, you know, you do a massive expansion with a massive noise. And of course, you know, you're not going to do this in front of your group. You're not going to get out in front of your group that you're going to present to and go, rah! But you can do that somewhere separate, you know, if maybe without the noise, if you don't want people to wonder what's going on in the next room. But in the old days, I used to go, you know, like you can do now with tapping, and like Louise did before the conference, she went to the toilet, and not only was she doing tapping before her presentation, she actually stood in there and she did the high power pose. And so in the study, after just 2 minutes of doing these high power poses, they had significant differences in the level of cortisol that they were measuring. And cortisol is your stress chemical. So same thing happens with tapping, by the way. The tapping will reduce the cortisol in the system. And Kerry's asking, are you holding the pose or redoing it over and over? If you do that pose for a few minutes before you go into your situation, you should have less stress chemicals in your system. So this is, again, a way of preparing. But by the way, should you redo it over and over? Yes. If you start doing stuff like this on a daily basis, then you're going to get some results. There's another study done by Wiseman up in the UK with 26,000 people where they just had people smiling for a few seconds each day. They had a significant improvement in their levels of happiness. Same things happens with your level of power. So in this case, your cortisol, which is suppressing your reaction, you know, went down. The stress chemicals went down significantly for the high power group and went up for the low power group. Just 2 minutes. These are massive differences, and you know, 20 to 25% difference, for example, in testosterone, where after 2 minutes in a high power pose, massive increase for the high power pose people, and then 2 minutes in a low power pose, massive decrease in testosterone for those groups. So these are things that you can combine with tapping, and this is something that Louise did in her presentation. She combined tapping with other techniques, and the other thing that she did was she learned from everything she did and she kept going. Don't give up. Don't see any presentation as your final presentation. And her position now, as you know, is that she's absolutely excited about giving presentations, and she's really enjoying doing that. And she's had a really good time um, at that conference, where she was hit with the feeling this is actually fun. And that's what I want for you. Now, I promise we're going to run out of time here. We're up to about 55 minutes since we started the conference or the recording. Monica says sound and vision gone. Is everybody else getting sound and vision okay, or is it just Monica that's lost the sound and vision? I hope that everybody else is still receiving. Okay, thank you. That's good. Okay, just worried me for a moment when she said the sound and vision was gone. Yeah, unfortunately, this is one of the one of the challenges of technology. Hopefully, if the recording works, then you'll be able to go back to that. I said I was going to give you some of the keys of professional speakers. I've been hanging around a lot of professional speakers over a number of years, and so I'm just going to share very quickly some of their secrets. Okay, thank you, Madeline in Montreal. Excellent, nice to have you here. And Anna in New Zealand, all good, excellent, nice to hear. Still good up in Darwin. Okay, sometimes in and out. Yeah, hopefully that the recording will be clear. Let me just quickly, and we'll kind of have to finish off here and pause this. And as I say, I'm already thinking about doing some more. There's been such a massive amount of interest in this topic. It's obviously an issue for so many people, and even people who are doing tapping like I was. Until I learned how to take that to the next level and start, for example, just one of my keys before I go into this professional speaker secrets was learning to do the continual tapping on a daily basis without having to be clever, but just adding the tapping into my routines until, oh my gosh, that's 3 a.m. in the Czech Republic. That's Jacob, isn't it? Well done you for being up at 3 a.m. to attend this webinar live. Good on you, mate. It's nice to see your name there and that you're writing. So one of the things for me was learning to do the tapping on a daily basis. And I say to my clients, if this is your stress chemistry and this is your good life energy, we want this to come down and this to come up. But if you do it once or you do it for a while, then you get that shift. But if you've got, like I have learned, that what I had myself was more of a generalized anxiety. And so for me, when I'd get that down and that up, that would be fine. But for some issues, it would stay down. But for other ones, it would come back up again. And so that was very, very frustrating until I learned that if you do enough of it on a daily basis, then this can become your new normal. And when your stress level is higher than your good life energy, then all your negative thoughts seem real. All your fears of what might happen seem like they're going to really happen. But when you get this down and this up, then you have the same thoughts, but they just flow straight through. They're not going to bother you. So daily tapping. And if you go away from here and you do a lot of tapping, especially in the next 24 hours on some of the things that have come up about the issues of presenting, some of the aspects that are there for you, do some tapping on those, do some tapping on things that might happen. This is part of your presentation preparation, by the way. So professional speakers, they do prepare and they practice and they rehearse. But while you're practicing and rehearsing and preparing, you can be tapping. You can be thinking about what's going to happen, tuning into your issues and doing tapping. You can also be doing tapping on a daily basis like I do, just to bring your levels down so that you're not at a high level and not going to be triggered as much. So practice and rehearse, practice and rehearse. This is kind of the thing that most professional speakers do. And then they practice and rehearse in front of a real live audience. Louise did this. She'd never done PowerPoint presentation before. She taught herself how to do that. And then she gave the presentation from me a couple of times. I was sadly, in fact, not sadly, turned out it was good. I was away when she had to give her presentation, and that was good because it meant that she really had to do it. And professional speakers will consider every eventuality and plan for it. What we did with our tapping was we considered everything that could go wrong, everything that you fear, and we did tapping on it. And a lot of you are just not doing this. You may be doing tapping on a lot of things, but you're not applying it to the negatives, and tapping works on the negatives. In terms of the thing, you want to have a backup plan. You know, a few minutes before we were going to come on here, this PowerPoint presentation, it wouldn't it wouldn't upload to the computer. I'd actually deleted. I had this prepared. I'd changed the program a little bit. I deleted the one that was on there. I uploaded it and left the office last night. Came back in this morning, it wasn't there, and it wouldn't upload. And luckily, I had a backup plan on what I was going to do if that didn't work. Fortunately, didn't have to worry about it, but I had the backup plan. This is something that Louise did as well. She visited the venue where she was going to give the talk. She imagined herself there, and she did tapping on that. That's another thing that you can do. All right, so a little bit further than that, the things that professional speakers use when they're there in the situation. For them, the most commonly thing I would have commonly heard from professional speakers that they do to get themselves right is while their introduction is being read out, while they're getting ready to be called, while it's coming around to their turn, that's when they'll take some deep breaths. Again, so this is something that you can combine with the tapping as well. You want to be tapping. Louise was tapping in the conference while she was waiting for her turn. She wasn't the first speaker. That's always good. But even if it is, you can go into the room beforehand. You can do the tapping. A few minutes before you have to speak if you're worried, and if you're like me and you get better results from the upper body points, then you can go off, like I used to go off to the toilets and do tapping there. Luckily, don't need to do that anymore. Don't have the problems that I used to have. When I had to do a speech for my mate's wedding years back, and I had diarrhea for 2 weeks before that, and I was absolutely a mess. I was so much of a mess that during the evening I couldn't eat my food. And any of you who know me, you know that's really bad. Someone, if I'm put off my food. Luckily, with tapping, I've been able to get over that. And so, I have a presentation. It's after a meal. I can eat the meal. I can enjoy myself. And if I do have anything that comes up or that triggers me, I can use the tapping on that. I have a pre-talk focus, and a lot of do this. And that is where you get clear before you go out what your intention is. What is it that you want to achieve from this, and what is it that you want them to get? The key intention is about how you want them to be afterwards. Because with that as your focus is outside of yourself. The thing about anxiety is an internal focus. It's all on your symptoms and on you and on your thoughts and all of that. And it completely takes you away from the audience. And this is why connecting with your audience and in particular ways of doing that, like focusing on the people in the room, choosing specific people and talking directly to them, for example, using mindfulness to pay attention to what's happening outside of you, or even using mindfulness on your symptoms when you're doing the tapping is great. But when you're in the room with a bunch of people, you want to be focused on them. And so you want to direct your intention towards them. You can, of course, be doing this tapping when you're in that situation to help you to cope with that situation. And again, probably the number one thing that professional presenters do is they tell stories from their own life, and they bring that stuff up that people can relate to because it's the human aspect. Now we're going to be finishing off in a moment. We're going to run out of time. I know that I said I'd go for an hour. We've gone a little bit over that. I'm going to have to wrap up. I just want to mention that with David Lake and his issue, you can treat some issues and you can be fine in some situations, and then other things can trigger you. So with David, he was fine and didn't have his anxiety for a couple of years after that experience with Gary. And then we had a situation in Sydney where Dr. Larry Nims had come to Sydney. There was a couple of hundred people in the room, and out of the blue, he just called David and me out the front. And as we were walking out, David said, "My problem's come back. I'm feeling anxious." I said, "It's not the same problem. It's off the cuff speaking." And he hadn't treated himself for off the cuff speaking. So after that, he treated himself for off the cuff speaking. Now he can speak off the cuff like a champion. And yeah, Carrie, I know some of you have to go. So cheers. See you later. There's only a couple of minutes left. It will be on the recording. Please take a look at the web page. I'll send that out on the email no worries. And so as another aspect comes up, you can treat it. And for David, there was another one when his wife, Jerry, came along to our workshops. He is a palliative care medical specialist. She was a bit skeptical about the tapping back in those days. And we're doing the first part of the presentation, and David comes up to me. He says, I'm feeling anxious about Jerry being in the room. I said, so am I. So we both went out the back and we did the tapping, and now there's no more problems with that. So as aspects come up in the, you can, if you focus on those, you can treat them. All right, well, we're going to have to wrap up here. I just have a couple of things to finish with. You know, this is kind of where I started, and this might feel familiar to you. This person says, I was painfully shy and terrified in front of people, but I had a passion and a mission. I was upset about what I perceived was ineffective, discouraging, and disrespectful approaches to psychotherapy and felt I had to do something to change this. So this is, you know, a lot of people have this with tapping. They want to be able to talk about tapping or put the tapping out there, and then they have the challenge of the fact that they have always been shy and terrified in front of groups and so on. For whatever reason, whatever it is for you, the day comes when you get the call and the universe says to you, come on, now's the time, you have to do this. And maybe this is your time. Maybe I can be that person for you. Maybe I can be the one saying to you, come on, you can do this and you need to do this. And when that call comes, this is most people's reaction. You've got the wrong person. I'm shy and terrified to speak in front of people, but there's another part of you. And sometimes it's like those parts are having internal civil war. And that part is saying, my whole life thus far has been preparing me for this moment and this calling. So I said yes to the call, and the rest, as they say, is history. That's Bill O'Hanlon, a very famous therapist I really admire. He's written hundreds of books and presented workshops and seminars all over the world. Whether it's seminars or whatever it is, whether it's just being able to speak at a wedding, whatever it is for you, being able to do that can be an absolute triumph feeling. You don't have to feel the fear and do it anyway. Although, if you do feel the fear, you can do it anyway. And you don't need to get that down to a zero, but ultimately that should be your aim. And with tapping, it can be achieved. I know it can be achieved because I've achieved it myself. I've had so many other people that have achieved it. All right, so we're going to finish off here. And I just want to point out where you can get some more. I'm setting up a resource page. This is where I will ultimately put this recording on our website. So if you go to the personal development bar and then drop down, there'll be a public speaking anxiety page. This is it here officially. So it's EFTdownunder.com/personal-development/public-speaking-anxiety/ or the short link www.EFTdownunder.com/P=3114. Either way you get there. Oops. Well, anyway, I didn't say I could draw or do art, all right? That's why I married an artist. Anyway, maybe I should tap. I'm going to have 100 of you telling me to tap on that. I hope you've had a really good time. I've really enjoyed presenting this with you. I hope that you found some things to work on. I'm going to ask you to send me your questions and stuff, and I'm going to do another webinar with question and answer and just specifically dealing with your questions. It will be another free webinar, and then I'm also thinking afterwards of doing a program, a tapping program, but that will be for later. For now, do the tapping, do a lot of tapping over the next 24, 48 hours particularly. Go through the aspects for you and answer the call. Cheers. Thank you so much for being part of this.